Hello, boys and girls in Year 5 and 6. Mr. Hogan here, as you can see, and I'm here today to talk you through the next step in your writing for your persuasive writing in Term 2. I've seen a lot of the work that has been submitted, the plans in your burgers, and the Peel plans as well that you guys have been preparing and to do your writing for your persuasive writing. And I'd like to remind you of the purpose of this entire persuasive writing thing. What we are trying to do, what you are trying to do is convince your reader. You are trying to persuade them to agree with you. And it's a really important skill to have to take into life as you go forward and as you get older. People are going to try to persuade you to believe things, to agree with them, to vote for somebody, to give money, to buy something. They're going to use a whole range of strategies to try to convince you, and you need to learn to use these strategies yourself. Now, this skill is one that is going to last you your whole life. As you get older and you go into social media, people are going to try to argue with you. They're going to try to convince you of things, and they're going to use some of these strategies you're learning about right now. And if you believe in something, if you care about something, whether it's the environment or politics or some local issue, you need to be able to convince people as well and take them with you so that you can make a change and make a difference in the world. It's a really important aspect. Now, what we're going to look at today is going from our planning and how to peel your way to better writing is what I'm calling it. Let's do some revision. So we've looked at persuasive devices. We looked at cause and effect, which is if you do this, then this will happen. Wouldn't that be terrible? Or if you guys did this, then that would happen. Isn't that fantastic? So that's cause and effect. Rhetorical questions. Do you know what a rhetorical question is? Personal pronouns. They allow us to build a sense of connection by saying we are all in this together. You wouldn't want that. How does that make you feel? There are personal pronouns. Alliteration. The slimy snakes in the, trying to think of a better word, the slimy snakes are trying to steal our right to learn. So you could use alliteration. Repetition, that's using repeating the language. The environment needs to be protected at all costs. The environment should be guarded by people. We must do everything we can. So we're repeating certain phrases. That sort of links in with the rule of 3, which is at the bottom there, where you say things and you use 3 examples, or you might say things, repeat things 3 times. It must be protected, it must be guarded, and this must be stopped now. So we use 3 examples or 3 things. Our emotive language, we know, appeals to emotions, okay? We use language that tries to make people have a heart reaction, because if they feel sad or they feel worried, or they see something that's like, man, I feel for that person, they will be persuaded. You will probably see that in things like your World Vision ads, where they show those poor kids in other countries who don't have an education, and they don't have access to clean water, and sometimes there's little babies that are sick and they're starving. That's an emotional appeal, and they use emotive language to try to convince you there. And then our high modality. High modality means that we have words that are strong and certain, okay? We don't use words like, oh, maybe we should build a bike ramp in Engadine. We say we must build a bike ramp. You could say you should do it, but that isn't as strong as saying we must do it. So we use our high modality words. Now, all of these persuasive devices are really useful, and I'm going to do an example today of how you can use some of them. I'm not going to try to use them all in one paragraph, okay? That would be a bit over the top, but I'd sprinkle them out throughout my persuasive writing, throughout the whole thing that I've planned, to try to make it a more effective, and try to use them as I need to. So let's have a look. We watched this one on Friday in week 2. This, I don't know if you remember it.
After school, as I was reading through Mr. Burton's tips on how to be persuasive, it occurred to me that some of the most persuasive people on the planet just happen to be living under my very own roof.
The girl goes through, and she looks at different examples. If you didn't watch that on Friday in week 2, it's worth watching. It's a pretty good example, but I'm not going to watch the whole thing now. These were the hints and the tips that came from the video. Now, these are also things that will persuade your reader or your viewer, okay? Some of these things might apply more to advertisements, but they certainly can be applied in our writing. So do your research, get some facts. I've seen the best peels that I've seen this week, or last week I should say, in week 3, the best peels had great research. Someone in my class quoted a study from Stanford University about homework and the stress it causes. And that was really effective. He went on and he did a search and he found that information. Now, I'm going to be convinced if you give me university-based research and facts. It doesn't have to be a percentage, but you can look it up. Okay, so facts. Be creative and use humour. Okay, a little bit of humour helps. Appeal to emotion, we've spoken about that. Real life emotion and experiences. Listen to others and use rebuttal, and don't get, no insults, don't get personal. I'm going to look at the second last one there because we haven't really talked too much about that or learnt about that, which is the thing called a rebuttal. So a rebuttal, I guess if you imagine that a persuasive sort of argument or an argument between two ideas or two people can be like a sword fight, all right? So you're swinging in with an argument and then you block it. So a rebuttal is a block. What you have to do with a rebuttal is you anticipate what other people might say, all right? Now, let's say I saw something last night. I know that they flattened the jumps down on Thorgona in Engadine, where a lot of people, I know people in our school and that I'm talking to right now, go and take their bikes and their mountain bikes and do jumps down there, and the council's flattened it. Now, we might have an argument there where we should say, look, someone actually proposed, let's use an area near Forbes Creek and let's set up 300 metres of different berms and jumps so that, and with different levels, so that it's a great place for the kids and people in the community to go and do some mountain biking. Now, if I was going to propose that, I might think, what would the people say against it? If I said, I want to use area near Forbes Creek to create a bike jump, mountain bikes with jumps and berms and great stuff, what might they say against it? Now, some people might say, for example, that could damage the environment near Forbes Creek. Okay, that sounds like a pretty good argument, right? And I'd go, okay, but I really want the bikes there. What can I do to counter that argument? So that I say, I want a bike track near Forbes Creek. They come in, they swing their argument and say, it's going to damage the environment. I've got to think, what can I say against that? Otherwise, they just get a free hit on me. So a rebuttal is a block. So I would say, okay, but when you look at that area, it was overgrown with weeds and lantana anyway. And so there's not really much native bush left there. So that is a rebuttal. Now, what they would look like, if you've probably read this while I've been talking, you might say something like, some people would argue that a bike jump near Forbes Creek would damage the environment. However, the environment there has already been choked up with weeds and lantana, and so the natural native plants wouldn't really be affected. Okay? Other examples there of a rebuttal. One argument against uniforms. What's an argument against uniforms? I have to think of a quick one. So one argument against uniforms is that it takes away students' individuality. But really, what the problem with that is, some kids can afford really cool clothes and others can't. So you create a system where, you get to be individual because you've got lots of money, but I just have to wear what my parents can afford to buy me. So I think that that's not a great argument against uniforms. You see how I'm doing this? I'm thinking ahead. If your topic is something to do with homework, you've got to think, what does the opposition believe? What will the opposition argue? And can I come up with a counter argument to that? So when they try to say this to me, I can block them. There have been calls for us to go to school on Saturdays. The problem with that is that all the school sport is on Saturdays. So that's a ridiculous idea. Okay, there's another example there. You might think this. However, if that occurred, so you might think that everyone should stop wearing uniform. However, if this occurred, what about excursions? Kids would get lost really easily and teachers would be stressed. Okay, that's an example of a rebuttal. So now what? There's a lot to remember. Okay, you've got all of your persuasive devices. You've got things like this, reminders to appeal to emotion and use humor. And you might be thinking, oh my God, there's so much. But that's okay. That's why we plan. We have our writing process where we plan and research in that part of the plan and research. We draft, then we edit and we rewrite the whole thing again. Okay, you don't just write one book and go, here you go, it's done. You write it, you fix it, you rewrite it, and it is better. Okay, nothing worth doing is super easy. All right, so we do an edit and you'll get a checklist for editing that you can use and say, have I got this, haven't I got this? And then we publish. So let's have a go. I'm going to have a go. I'm going to write this off the top of my head. I haven't really planned it too well, but that's okay because this is a real experience. I'm drafting. What I write won't be perfect. In fact, I'm a very good speller, but I might even put some intentional spelling mistakes in there. See if you can pick them up. Might even make a mistake with grammar. Maybe you can spot that as well. Okay, so let's have a look at a woggle, what a good one looks like. Peel plan, and I'll try to write a paragraph to match it. You've all done your peels. If you haven't done your peel paragraphs, and you should have 3 of them, you are behind. It's that simple. Everyone else has done it. If you haven't done it, you're behind. So you need to catch up on that. Let's have a look. Now, this is an example I made up with some fake research. Someone is writing a persuasive argument that Mr. Hogan should shave his beard. Okay. Now, the first point that they're arguing is that Mr. Hogan's beard is not attractive. Ridiculous. Okay, so they're going to try to convince the reader and the viewer and whoever's reading it that Mr. Hogan should shave his beard because it just doesn't look very good. Now, they did some research, apparently. They did some research. A 2018 survey, 74% of people said that short beards are attractive. Okay. The same survey, 83% said long beards are not attractive. Okay. And it's grey. Now, remember, your peel is just a plan, so it doesn't have to be full sentences here. Some of you, I've seen some of them have written, like whole sentences here, but it's just a plan, and you don't have to have that. Now, we made our point, it's not attractive. We've got some evidence, and now we're evaluating or explaining, okay? So what I will do here is basically go through and explain what that means and put it into words. And I put long and horrid like Mr. Twig because I could use like a bit of humour there, I guess. And then the link, it links my argument and it links to the next thing. And the next argument is going to be about how dirty it is. So let's have a go. I've just put these in here so that it can help me keep track of everything. Peel your paragraph. Here's my reminders. So I might have to exit this and go into this version. All right. I wonder if I can zoom in for you. Okay, let's have a go. Hopefully you can see this on your screen okay. I don't know if I can present. I'm going to try that. I don't think I can present and edit at the same time. No, I can't. So I'll just exit and I'll just type it straight in here. Okay, so starting a peel paragraph. Right, what am I trying to say? Mr. Hogan should. Long beards are ugly. Bang. Making a strong, high modality, pretty confident statement. Long beards are ugly. What next? What should I say? In a survey conducted by the University of Newcastle, they found that, what was the data? 83% of people thought that long beards were unattractive. All right, that's using my data. Short beards were found to be okay. I don't want to try to say heaps about like beards are great, so I'm going to just think about that. Short beards were found to be okay, but those, I'm going to use some repetition. Long, lanky, alliteration. What's another word? Lazy beards, like the one Mr. Hogan is wearing. Just, let's go a bit over the top, made people feel sick. Okay, now I'm going to evaluate my information here. Mr. Hogan's grey beard reminds people of Mr. Twit, that notoriously ugly, well, that's a good word, notoriously horrid, that notoriously horrid man who tortures his wife and the local birds. So what I've got to think, I want to make Mr. Hogan shave his beard, all right? So I've got to reinforce that. Let me just read it again. Long beards are ugly. In a survey conducted by the University of Newcastle, you can tell where I've made spelling mistakes because it's done the spell check for me. So I'll fix that up now, because why not edit while we go? That's okay as well. In a survey conducted by the University of Newcastle, they found that 83% of people thought that long beards were unattractive. Short beards were found to be okay, but those long, lanky, lazy beards, like the one Mr. Hogan is wearing, just made people feel sick. I wonder if I could put in here, no, I think I'll leave that. Mr. Hogan's grey beard reminds people of Mr. Twit, that notoriously horrid man who tortures his wife and the local birds. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to do an example of a rebuttal. Okay, I'll do an example of a rebuttal here. Some people might argue that being attractive isn't that important. Personally, I believe being attractive isn't that important, but let's see. Some people might argue that being attractive isn't that important. And let's look back at the example I've got here. I could say however or but. I might say however. Some people might argue that being attractive isn't that important. However, and the correct way to do however is you do a comma, you write however, and then you do another comma. I'll just increase the font size here so that you can see this. Some people might argue that being attractive isn't that important. However, surely being I don't know what's doing that. Surely being intentionally ugly is not a great idea. What if he? No, I'll just leave that, I think. I'll use a rhetorical question. Who would want to look like Mr. Twit? Now I'll link back to my main argument, which is about shaving the beard off or getting rid of the beard, and then I'll link to my next argument, which is about being dirty. So I'll just reread it. It's really important you reread what you've written as you go, okay? Long beards are ugly. In a survey conducted by the University of Newcastle, they found that 83% of people thought that long beards were unattractive. Short beards were found to be okay, but those long, lanky, lazy beards, like the one Mr. Hogan is wearing, just made people feel sick. I don't think I need that comma there. Mr. Hogan's grey beard reminds people of Mr. Twit, that notoriously horrid man who tortures his wife and the local birds. Some people might argue that being attractive isn't that important. However, surely being intentionally ugly is not a great idea. Who would want to look like Mr. Twit? I'm sure Mr. Hogan, here you go, I've just got an idea. I'm sure Mr. Hogan has a nice face under all of that gross hair. Oh God, I'm mean to myself sometimes. I'm sure Mr. Hogan has a nice face under all of that gross hair. He should shave his beard to let us, there's a personal pronoun, all see it. And now, last thing I want to link to my next argument. That would also solve another problem. His beard is dirty. Okay, let's read over that and I'll wrap up the video. Thank you for paying attention and watching, and we'll see, well, it's a little bit big. We'll see how this reads. I'll move this out of the way. Go away, list. Okay, so I've used a few things here. I wonder if you can spot them. I've already said a few of them, but I'm not trying to use all of my persuasive devices. It's like a magician going, I'm going to do a trick, and doing everything all at once. You just do one thing at a time, introduce a little bit, save some devices for the rest of it. Now, this is a fairly long paragraph. It's something that I think you guys could write these paragraphs. I really do. If you're someone who needs some help with writing, don't forget to ask your teacher. Let's have a read of it and then we'll wrap up. Mr. Hogan shaved his beard because it's not attractive. I've got my data, I've peeled it. Let's see. Long beards are ugly. In a survey conducted by the University of Newcastle, they found that 83% of people thought that long beards were unattractive. Short beards were found to be okay, but those long, lanky, lazy beards, like the one Mr. Hogan is wearing, just made people feel sick. Mr. Hogan's grey beard reminds people of Mr. Twit, that notoriously horrid man who tortures his wife and the local birds. Some people might argue that being attractive isn't that important. However, surely being intentionally ugly is not a great idea. Who would want to look like Mr. Twit? I'm going to make that a question mark. I could have an exclamatory question with an exclamation mark, but I'm just going to make it a question mark for my rhetorical question. I'm sure Mr. Hogan has a nice face under all of that gross hair. He should shave his beard to let us all see it. That would also solve another problem. His beard is dirty. Okay, so my last sentence links to my next paragraph, and I could talk about how gross and dirty the beard is with bits of food just like Mr. Twit and coronavirus in your beard. There's no coronavirus in my beard, I promise you. But you get the picture. I'm trying to persuade to shave the beard. Now, I hope that helps you, boys and girls. Your job this week is to take each of your peel plans and turn it into something like that. Something like this paragraph here, to make sure that you've got a persuasive, interesting, persuasive piece of writing. I hope that helps, and yeah, that's it. That's Mr. Hogan's help how to peel into a paragraph to make persuasive writing. See you later. I'm really looking forward to seeing some of your work, looking for those wonderful works and people who are submitting their work on time. If you're a little bit behind, catch up. Okay, see you guys. Got to pause, stop recording now, and stop.